Well, in typical Ashley fashion, I am running late to a tournament, so I'm gonna keep the intro short, but I just pulled up to Texas Card House Dallas where I'm gonna play in the $200 buy-in, 10,000 guarantee tournament. So let's get in there, get some good hands for the vlog, and if we bust, we're gonna jump in some cash, but either way, it's gonna be a great day at the tables. I'll see you guys inside.
All right, we are ready to jump in this $200 10K guaranteed tournament here at Texas Card House Dallas, my home poker room in the Dallas area. Super excited, as always, to jump in and play a tournament and getting my feet wet before hitting the World Series of Poker. We're on a good little win streak, so let's see if we can add to our bankroll challenge before leaving out for the World Series of Poker. As you've heard me talk lately, I won a World Series of Poker ring and a Run Good ring, and I just had two of my largest scores, one for $20,000 and another one for $23,000. A lot of you have been asking what I've been studying, and I've been using advanced poker training. Not only can you play up to 500 hands per hour against GTO style opponents, but your virtual advisor shows you your entire range of hands and what action is recommended with each, just like you'd get out of a solver. If you want to try it out, use the link in my description and use offer code POKERFACEASH and you'll get a discount. Alright, we're a little bit late to this tournament, so we're going to start with 30,000 chips at 300-600, good enough for 50 big blinds. I am so excited to announce I am going to be doing a meetup game back where it all started at my home casino in Chandler, Arizona, August 10th at 4 p.m., a 2-3 meetup game at Lone Butte Casino. Come out, hang out with me, have some fun, play some poker, and make your way on to the vlog. While I'm in town, I'll also be hosting the Mystery Bounty Tournament the very next day. It's a $600 buy-in, there will be 3 starting flights and mystery bounties up to $15,000, so make sure you guys come out and join me at Lone Butte Casino. Right away, in our second hand dealt, we find ourselves in an interesting spot. The blinds are 300-600 with a 600 big blind ante, and we have Queen 10 of clubs under the gun 1. This hand, as you can see, is definitely good enough to put in the raise, so I make it 2 big blinds, which is 1,200. The player to my immediate left calls, and then the low jack puts in the raise to 3,800. I just sat down, I don't know anything about my opponents, but as you can see, in this spot, when we're 50 big blinds effective and I'm under the gun 1 and have an under the gun 2 player call and then facing a raise from the low jack, this hand is just going to be a fold. The player to my left is going to be flatting with a lot of hands that have us dominated, and then the low jack, while in theory he can have a more robust 3-betting range, in practice at these stakes he's just going to have a lot of premiums in this spot. So because of all these reasons, we're going to let one of our worst suited Broadway hands go. I fold, and then the player to my left makes the call, and they end up playing a pot, and the low jack ended up having pocket aces.
Alright, only played a few hands before jumping into our first break since I arrived late. Played a couple hands and do want to check those spots when I get home. The Queen 10 of clubs, I think facing a 3-bet and this player pool with multiple people in the hand, I'm not sure. We can probably peel, but however, he does show aces. Usually they're very strong when they 3-bet in these lower buy-in tournaments. So anyway, coming back to 400, 800, 800, and we're going to have about 30 big blinds, which is more than enough to do something here, but we'll see what happens.
The blinds have now gone up to 400, 800, 800, and after the blinds have gone around, I find myself with a stack of 27,600. There's a limp from a recreational player in the cutoff, and it folds to me in the small blind, and I look down at ace-queen offsuit. We are at a position facing one limp, so I'm gonna go about 2,400, and I probably could have gone a little bit bigger, like maybe 3,000. And to my surprise, the big blind puts in the call and the original limper folds, so we're going to go heads up out of position to a flop of 10-8-3 with 2 clubs. We are out of position, we don't have a club on our hand, but we do have one of our better ace ties, and as you can see, our range in the spot is going to be mixing a lot between betting big, betting small, and checking, and as you can see, ace-queen offsuit with our combination specifically wants to put in a check, so let's see what our opponent does and go from there. Luckily for us, we won't have a tough decision on the flop because our opponent checks behind and we're going to head to a turn card, which is the queen of clubs, so now the club flush comes in. I would expect my opponent to bet some, if not all of his flush draws on the flop, especially being in position, so when the queen of clubs rolls off, I'm not too concerned about my opponent having a flush. However, we do have top pair, top kicker at this point, and we do want to deny equity to all of his hands that hold a club in them, so I start betting, and I make it 3,000. My opponent snap calls, which I know you guys have heard me talk about quite a bit. When a player snap calls, it generally means that they have a pretty weak holding, something they weren't contemplating raising or folding, so some type of showdown value hand that doesn't want to fold just yet, which usually means it's a pretty weak pair. The river is a 5, but it is the 5 of clubs, so now we are losing to any club because we do not have one in our hand. I check, just hoping to get to showdown, and luckily for us, our opponent checks behind and flips over pocket fours with no clubs, so we are going to take this nice pot down. In this hand, our stack is 34,000 and blinds are 400, 800, 800. There's a limp from under the gun 1, and a player 2 to my right limps as well. I'm on the button and look down at ace-jack offsuit. I think this is a good hand to put in a raise, especially on the button, and try to isolate and pick up this dead money. I raised to 2,500. Both the limpers call, so now we're going 3 ways to a flop of queen, queen, 10 with 2 hearts and 1 spade. The under the gun 1 limper now leads for 3,000. The player in the hijack folds, and now it's on me. We have backdoor spades and a gut shot to the nuts, and if we hit an ace on the turn, that could be good as well. Our opponent most likely just has a 10x combination here, or he just has a queen, but either way, we have outs to improve. So when he leads for 3,000, we make the call. The turn is the 6 of hearts, and our opponent bets again for 8,000. Now, with our hand not improving, we can't continue to call here, especially for 10 big blinds in this spot, so I put in the fold, and we're going to move on to the next one. At this point, the blinds have gone around, we haven't gotten much going, so we are at 400, 800, 800, and I have 24,700 chips. There's a limp in the low jack and the hijack. The cutoff then raises to 4,000. I'm next to act on the button and look down at pocket jacks. We have just around 30 big blinds, and I think this is a great spot to put in the shove. We can get some folds and then pick up all the dead money without being at risk. And if we do get called, we're happy to flip for 30 big blinds at this stage in the tournament because we're trying to build a stack and we can still rebuy if needed. It folds back around to the hijack, and surprisingly, she thinks for a little bit and then re-shoves. So she limps and then shoves, and now it's back on the original raiser who made it 4,000, and he's in a tough spot facing 2 all-ins. He ends up folding pocket 9s, and I'm up against ace-queen. Here's what happened.
It's a raise, there you go. It's a raise, there you go.
So the flop was clean, and then the turn gave us no sweat as we make a set, and now we're gonna full double up here, and now we have 56,200 chips at 400, 800, 800. At this point, we folded for a little bit. The blinds have now gone up and they are 500, 1,000, 1,000, and we have 51,200 chips. There's a limp in the cutoff, and then I'm on the button and look down at ace-queen offsuit. I raise to 3,000. Only she calls, so we go heads up to a flop of 989 rainbow. She checks, and now with this type of board texture, it's very static. There's not a lot going on, not a lot of draws, plus it's a paired board, so we can down bet pretty much our entire range, so I bet 1,200. She makes the call, so we head to a turn card, which is the 6 of hearts. She checks yet again. This card isn't the best barreling card for our exact hand, plus we can still be ahead of a lot of hands that she might float the flop with. So on this card, we're going to check behind and see what happens on the river. Well, the river is the queen of diamonds, and now she checks yet again. We do make a very strong hand here on the river, and we definitely gotta go for some value. I'm not entirely sure what we can get called by, especially given the action, but maybe she'll look us up with a pair, maybe a hand like pocket 7s, so I bet 6,000. She folds pretty quickly, and we take down another nice pot. In this hand, the blind have gone up to 600, 1,200, 1,200, and I have 51,200 chips. There's a limp in the low jack, and I'm next to act in the cutoff and look down at pocket 3s. While we can raise here, given the action, there's been a lot of call-happy players at the table. I don't think we're going to get this one through, so I limp behind. The big blind calls as well, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of queen 10-3 with 2 diamonds, so we flop bottom set. It checks over to me, and I bet 4,000. The big blind and the low jack call, so now we're still headed 3 ways to a turn card, which is the king of diamonds, bringing in the diamond flush. They check it over to me, and now I'm going to check this one back against 2 opponents and head to the river. The river is the 5 of hearts, and it checks to me yet again. Now we gotta go for some value. It's unlikely my opponents have flushes given the action, and we pretty much have the effective nuts. I bet 6,000. The opponent in the low jack calls, and she says, "I think you're bluffing." I call, I flip over my hand, and she mucks, and we take down a really nice pot, so now we're up to over 80,000 in chips. In this hand, we have 82,800 chips, and blinds are 600, 1,200, 1,200. It folds to me in the low jack and I look down at ace jack offsuit. I make it 2500. The button, who is a very tight straightforward player, calls, so we're going heads up to a flop of king 5-4 with 2 clubs. On this type of board, being out of position, we are going to be checking a ton over to the button, and as you can see here, our ace jack offsuits without a club is checking at 100% frequency, so I do check. My opponent is a very fit or fold player, meaning if he has a hand, he's gonna bet it. If he doesn't, he's going to check. And sure enough, he does reach for chips and bets 5,000. We're not gonna do anything here except put in the fold. We don't need to speculate or get fancy out of position when we have chips in this low buy-in tournament, and we can use our chip stack in a better situation going forward. In this hand, blinds are 600, 1200, 1200, and I have 71,100 chips. And in this hand, stacks will be 20,200 effective, which is just over 16 big blinds. I'm under the gun 1, and I look down at ace king of clubs, and I raise to 2,500. The low jack, who is a pretty tight player, makes the call. Then the button, who only has a little over 16 big blinds, raises to 8,000. Now it's back on me, and I don't think there's anything to do here other than shove all in. The player to my left will have to fold pretty much every single hand he flatted in this spot, so I think we're incentivized to shove and isolate and hope to get heads up against the button. Sure enough, the low jack does fold, and then the button puts in his stack, and we are up against pocket jacks. We are off to the races, and here's what happened.
Same hand. Good push, but mine was not suited.
So unfortunately, we didn't win this one. However, it's a spot we have to take, especially when my opponent only has 16 big blinds. So now we're down to around 50,000 chips, and we're going to continue to try and build back up. So at this point, the blinds have gone up to 800, 1600, 1600. It's folded around to me, and I'm on the button with king 9 offsuit. As you can see, our button opening range is going to be a lot of hands, and specifically, I thought it was worth mentioning in this hand that the small and the big blind are some of the tightest players at the table, and they're very passive. So obviously our exact hand is a slam dunk open, but if I was gonna deviate and open up my button raising range even wider, I would start including even more of the suited hands like Jack Deuce suited, 10-3 suited. I would start including hands like 8-7 offsuit, 8-6 offsuit, and I'd probably add even more hands in there because we know we can either get the blinds to fold and take it down pre-flop, or when they whiff the flop, we can c-bet and take it down, or assert aggression and get them to fold by the river. In this hand, the blinds are 800, 1600, 1600, and I'm under the gun 1 and look down at ace king offsuit. I raise it up to 3500. The low jack and the small blind calls, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of jack 8, jack rainbow. The small blind checks it to me. I think our hand is good enough to put in a bet here. We can get a lot of hands to fold, and I don't need to bet too big. I make it 4,000. The low jack calls, the small blind fold. We're going heads up to a turn card, which is the king of spades. So when the king of spades rolls off, we now have top pair, top kicker, and we hit our hand. Like I said, my opponent to my left is extremely tight, only continues when he has made hands. So while I am a little bit concerned he can actually have a jack in this spot, which I know sounds crazy, because he flatted my raise under the gun pre-flop, he can also have hands in his range like 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s. So because we're either way ahead or way behind, I'm gonna check and see if we can get some extra value on the river, or try to keep this pot manageable, being out of position in case we are beat against this very tight player. So I check. Sure enough, my opponent now bets 8,000. I don't love it. I don't see what hands my opponent's gonna start betting here. If he had a pair like 10s or worse, perhaps he maybe floated me on the flop with king queen, but against this player type, it's just not very likely. However, I just hit my hand. I have top pair, top kicker. I can't fold, so I put in the call and we head to a river, which is the 4 of spades. So the spade flush does come in. However, I'm not concerned about that at all because given the player type my opponent is, he would never start betting a flush draw on the turn. So I check yet again, hoping that I can just get the showdown at this point. However, my opponent puts out a bet of 10,000. It doesn't feel good. I'm not beating much, especially against my opponent's very narrowed range as he is very tight, but I flick in the call and sure enough, my opponent has ace jack offsuit. So we lose a pretty annoying one here when we hit our card on the turn, but we are no good. In this hand, blinds are 800, 16, 16. There's a bunch of limps in late position, and I'm in the small blind, look down at ace 6 offsuit. Gonna complete here, the big blind checks his options, so we're going multi-way to a flop of deuce, king, 6 with 2 hearts, so we flop ourselves middle pair, and we do have the ace of hearts. Most of my opponents shouldn't really have many strong king X combinations. I think our hand is gonna be best here. A lot of the time we can thin the field or just take this one down because my opponents are pretty tight, so I bet 3,500. The player in the big blind makes the call and the others fold, so now we're going heads up to a turn card, which is the 3 of hearts, so now we have the nut flush draw and our pair of 6s. My opponent only has about 12,000 left in his stack. I think we can keep betting here for value, and if our opponent shoves, we can call off, and if we're behind, we've got lots of outs, so I bet 5,200. Sure enough, my opponent goes all in, so we follow through with the plan, make the call, hoping that if we are behind, we can hit our outs to improve. My opponent flips over king, deuce, offsuit with the deuce of hearts, so turns out he has 2 pair. If he would have ripped on the flop, I would have been able to fold and get away from it, but now on this turn card, we can't go anywhere. So I flip my hand over, the dealer's gonna run the cards, and here's what happened.
Yeah, we got a button out. There's no hearts, please. I won't block.
So I end up hitting one of my outs, which was the ace on the river to make a better 2 pair, and now we are back up to a healthy stack. In this hand, I battled the player that we lost the ace king versus ace jack to earlier on in the tournament, and this time it folds around to us on the button and I have ace king of clubs. I raise to 3,600 and only he calls in the big blind, so we are going heads up to a flop of king, queen, ace, rainbow, so we flop a top 2 pair. He checks, and on this type of board texture, we can either go really big or pretty small, and I choose the small size of 1,700, trying to keep all of his king X and queen X hands in there, perhaps even a hand like jack 9 that just has a gut shot, hands like that, so I bet 1,700. He makes the call, the turn is the 9 of spades, so now it brings in the spade flush draw. He checks again, and now we're going to start sizing up a little bit. We want to charge all of his flush draws, and if he has an ace in his hand, we want him to continue with that, or he could just have a worse 2 pair, like we could be coolering a hand like queen 9 or king queen or ace 9, etc. So I bet 8,500. He makes the call yet again, so I'm thinking at this point, because of how tight he is, he either has a really strong draw or he has a very good made hand. The river is a complete brick, it's the 2 of clubs, and he checks yet again. I think if he had a really strong hand in this spot, he would start leading, so in this case, I'm gonna go for some value, and I bet 17,000, hoping to get called by a slightly worse hand than ours. Unfortunately, he does make the fold, but we win a very nice pot and now boost our stack back up to around 80,000. In this hand, there's 3 limps in front of me, and then I'm in the low jack with ace 5 of clubs. While we can consider raising this hand, my opponents are very sticky pre-flop, so me raising here, unless I make it something absurdly large, they're just gonna call me, and the beautiful thing about limping in this spot is we keep all worse flush draws in, and we can potentially cooler somebody. So I decided to limp as well in the low jack, and then the small and the big blind come along, so we are going multi-way to a flop of ace, 6, 10 with 1 club, so we flop top pair and a backdoor flush draw. It checks over to me, and I'm not going to start piling money in with a hand like ace 5. I'm going to check and see what develops. Sure enough, the flop does check through, so we head to a turn card, which is the 9 of clubs, so now we have top pair and a flush draw. It checks over to me yet again, and now while our hand can be good, we also have a monster draw, and if we do get raised, our hand is more than good enough to put in a call, so I bet 4,500. I pick up 2 callers, and now we head to a river, which is the jack of clubs, so we river the ace high flush. The beautiful thing about this board is so many hands get there, there's so many worse hands that my opponents can have that we can extract a lot of value from. Plus, my backdoor flush that came in is pretty disguised. We can get called by the nut straight, other types of straights, worse flushes, all kinds of 2-pair combinations, so I'm gonna go for a size of 15,000. The player to my left makes the call, I show my hand, and then he flips over 7-8 offsuit for a straight, so he could have raised the turn, we would have played an even bigger pot, but he just elected to call, and we win a very, very nice pot, so now we are up over 110,000 chips.
Alright guys, well, tournaments are definitely a roller coaster, and we've been on one today, so that ace king versus jack's hand really kind of was unfortunate there, and especially my table mate telling me folded an ace and a king, you never want to hear that. However, we were suited, we're definitely getting in there, especially against a short stack. He had less than 20 big blinds, and then of course getting lucky with the ace 6. Once I bet the turn, I can't fold given how much I'd already invested in the pot and how much I had left, and an ace was one of our outs, so we did bink that, and then of course I just got dealt hand after hand, just playing a lot, and honestly, this has been the toughest tournament vlog I've ever recorded. I'm trying really hard to track all the action, how many big blinds, so I can make sure and make these as good as I can for you guys. But it's taken a lot of my focus and it's just been quite difficult, so I hope I'm doing a good job and I'm trying to document everything. There was a point there where things got so crazy that I couldn't even take notes, so hopefully I got the action right and everything. But anyway, we have about 10 minutes left on our break. Going to try and spin this up. We're in a good spot, so let's see what we can do.
Well, this hand I kind of butchered, but we're gonna go with it. The blinds are now 1,000, 2,000, 2,000, and I have a stack of 108,000 for just over 50 big blinds, a very healthy stack at this stage in the tournament. I raise under the gun 2 with ace-king offsuit to 5,000. Only the small blind, who's a pretty active and aggressive player, makes the call, so we go heads up to a flop of queen 10-6 with 2 diamonds. He checks it over to me, and on this type of board, queen 10-6 exactly, my hand should be betting at a very, very high frequency. Sure, we can check a very, very small percentage of the time, but really our hand just wants to bet. We have 2 overcards and a gut shot to the nuts. Plus, we can start putting pressure on the middle of his range. But I do the complete opposite of this and check. The turn is the ace of spades, so now we have top pair, top kicker. He checks, and now we gotta go for some value, and I bet 6,000. He makes the call. The river is the queen of clubs, and he checks it over to me yet again. This is not the best card in the world, as our opponent can definitely have a queen X in his range. However, I think I need to be going for some thin value in this spot. But again, I do the opposite of what I should do, and I check behind. And unfortunately, our opponent had ace 5, so we probably are getting heroed if I bet a little bit on the smaller side. So we definitely missed out on some value on the river, but we're gonna move on to the next hand. We face a pretty interesting spot when we have 123,000 in chips and the blinds are 1,000, 2,000, 2,000. In this hand, stacks are 20 big blinds effective. I raise pocket 8s in early position to 5,000. Only the big blind calls and he has just under 20 big blinds after he makes the call. The flop is jack 6 deuce with 2 diamonds and my opponent open jams for about 18 big blinds. In theory, I'm supposed to be calling here, but in these lower buy-in fields, when I feel like I have a very good edge, if I have a very healthy stack, which I do at this point, there's no point in speculating and making a speculative call here when we can invest our chips in a better spot. Sure, he can just have a flush draw, maybe even a 6, or he can just have a hand like jack 10 that wants to deny equity against my overcards. At these stakes, it's very unpredictable, but I don't need to guess here. I can save 20 big blinds and fold and only lose my 5,000 chips. Also, there's a little bit under 25 people remaining, and we're getting close to approaching that money bubble, and having chips on the money bubble in these types of tournaments is extremely advantageous. So for all those reasons, we're gonna fold and move on to the next hand. In this hand, blinds are still 1,000, 2,000, 2,000, and there's a limp under the gun 1. I'm next to act and look down at pocket queens. I raise to 7,000, and I'm happy to see the player to my left jam all in for 46,000 chips. It folds back around to me. Of course, we're making the call, and here's what happened.
Oh.
Oh, what?
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
So lucky for us, our opponent has pocket jacks, the board runs out clean, we hold, and now we have over 166,000 chips. In this hand, we have about 160,000 chips, and blinds have just gone up to 2,000, 4,000, 4,000. It folds around to me in the low jack, and I look down at pocket aces. I raise to 9,000. The small blind, who's a very big stack, calls, and the player in the big blind calls, so we are going 3 ways to a flop of 8, 7, 3 with 2 spades. They check it over to me, and we don't have a spade in our hand. However, I think we can split between betting or checking in this spot, but if I'm gonna bet, I don't want to bet too small, and I don't want to bet too large, so I think around half pot is pretty reasonable, so I land on a size of 14,000. Luckily for us, we don't have to face any tough decisions or bad runouts because they both fold, and we take down the pot. At this point, we have about 168,000 chips and 24 people remain, and in this tournament, they're paying top 12. We're in a great spot with a decent stack to do some damage and hopefully make the final table. However, this is also the point in the tournament where the blinds are now going to increase at a very, very rapid pace. So now, even if you have about 20 or so big blinds, you actually are one of the bigger stacks. So as long as we can maintain a decent stack, over 15 to 20 big blinds, I'll know how to navigate this and we'll be in good shape. this hand, blinds have gone up to 3,000, 6,000, 6,000, and I have a little over 170,000 in my stack. I'm under the gun 1 and look down at ace queen offsuit. I raise to 15,000. A recreational player in the big blind only has about 10 big blinds to start the hand, but she makes the call, so we're gonna go heads up to a flop of jack, deuce, deuce, rainbow. She checks it over to me, and on this board, we have 2 overcards. It's very likely my opponent has missed, and with her stack size, we don't want to bet small and let her roll off a pair on the turn, so we're gonna move all in and put her to the test. She folds very quickly, and we pick up even more precious big blinds. In this hand, blinds are 3,000, 6,000, 6,000 still, and there's a raise from the low jack who's been raising a decent amount of hands. He makes it 12,000. The small blind also comes along, and then I'm in the big blind and look down at ace king offsuit. Since my opponent in the low jack has around 25 big blinds, we're not afraid to put in a 3-bet here and get it in versus this player. By raising out of the big blind, we want to make it a polarized sizing, meaning we want to raise a bit larger, because we're out of position and we can put maximum pressure on our opponents to commit their stack. So I make it 41,000. And luckily for us, we don't have to risk our stack as the low jack and the small blind fold, and we pick up over 5 big blinds without having to see a flop. So now we are getting dealt hand after hand and picking up some nice pots. We have 231,000 and the blinds are 3,000, 6,000, 6,000. A stack that has us covered. He has piles, he has almost 300,000 in chips. He raises under the gun to 16,000. I'm in the small blind and I look down at deja vu, ace king offsuit yet again. This player is pretty unpredictable, he's very aggressive, and we are nearing the money bubble, so I don't want to get mixed up in a big hand against him. So I decide to play my hand a bit deceptively and put in the call. We go heads up to a flop of 10, 9, 3 with 2 hearts. I check and he checks back. This player's tendencies is to c-bet very often, especially when he hits a piece of the board. So when he checks here, I think he has some overcards. He was raising every single ace-x combination under the gun, so perhaps he even has a hand like ace-5 offsuit that just completely whiffed this flop. So when he checks, I think my hand is likely ahead, as I would expect him to bet all of his pocket pairs and his better Broadway cards like king, queen, queen, jack, etc. So we head to a turn card, which is a 7 of diamonds, so now there's a double flush draw on board. I think me calling out a small blind, he's gonna think this board hits me way more than it hits him. So again, branching out a little bit exploitatively, I'm gonna put in a bet and see if we can steal this one. I bet 16,000. Sure enough, he folds very quickly, and we get to take this one down, playing ace-king offsuit a little bit weirdly. So it's a good thing we ran pretty good early, because right after that hand we folded for quite a while, but we were able to watch the player number drop, and then finally we were in the money. There's 12 of us left and now we're headed to break.
All right, we are on break. I think there's 11 or 12 players left, but now we get to go for it. We have under 20 big blinds, and this is a spot where we're just gonna go for, all the flips and the races, try to run hot and run good and make a push for that final table.
So after we got into the money, there's a lot of short stacks, there's gonna be a lot of shoving. And let me tell you a little story about the player under the gun. He's to my immediate left and he has over 500,000 chips, and every time he had a 4 in his hand, he would shove. Pocket 4s, 7-4 off, ace 4 off, jack 4 offsuit. Anytime he had a 4 in his hand, he would go all in. And you'd think if he was doing that, he'd be losing chips, but no. He kept knocking out players that had pocket kings, pocket jacks, ace 10 offsuit, etc. So he was single-handedly narrowing this tournament down pretty quickly for us. There's now 10 players left and we're 1 away from the final table. So in this hand, blinds are 5,000, 10,000, 10,000, and I have just about 17 big blinds behind. The under the gun, Mr. 4 himself, raises to 40,000, so he makes it 4 big blinds under the gun. He's playing crazy, he's playing reckless, he's a little bit unpredictable. Then it folds all the way around to me in the big blind, and I look down at ace, king of spades. He can pretty much have any 2 cards at this point. This is a hand that wants to see all 5 cards. We don't want to just peel, see a flop, and have to fold to his aggression, because I know a c-bet is coming. So we just want to shove, and perhaps he was just messing around with some weird hand under the gun and finds a fold, and we can just take it down and pick up a lot of big blinds without seeing a flop. Or if he does find a call, we're happy to be 60-40 or flipping, or have him absolutely crushed if he has a worse ace than us, and put ourselves in a huge position to not only make a big final table push, but to win this thing. So I shove all in, he calls, here's what happened.
A nice time to he's fucking it's his day. If you win this, this will be crazy. Jack, king, Oh my god, forceful.
Well, that was the flip we wanted to win to put ourselves in a position to win this tournament, but it wasn't meant to be. So we were in the tournament for $200 and we got 10th place for $515 for a profit of $315. And if you're wondering what I use to track all of my stats, I use Poker Analytics. It's the best and most intuitive app out there to track all the stats that you need for your poker ventures. And to download it, click the link below now.
Well guys, we win that flip there. We have a very good shot at chopping or winning that tournament for sure. That guy was raising every single hand if he had a 4 in his hand, so he was knocking people out with 7-4 off, 5-4 offsuit, Jack-4 offsuit, and of course under the gun, he raises 4x, makes it 40,000. I'm in the big blind, have 16 big blinds behind. I have ace-king suited. It's a hand that wants to see all 5 cards, especially with that many big blinds left. So we rip it in and he snap calls us with the 4s. He never folded if he had a 4 in his hand, and he was chip leading. He had like 600k, running like God, and of course we can't get there. We get 10th place for $515. So we were in for 200, out for 515 for a profit of $315. Last session we lost about 1100, so we did make a little bit of a dent in getting back into profit bills. So now we're only stuck about 800 in the last 2 sessions. So tomorrow I'm going to play some cash most likely and some 2-5 over at Las Colinas, so I'll see you guys over there. I hope you guys learned something. There was a lot to unpack in this vlog. There were so many interesting spots I played. If you guys enjoyed the vlog, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, and subscribe? It would mean the world to me. We are just getting started and it's only up from here. I'll see you guys next time.